Dr. Vex Moreland had seen plenty of bizarre things during his 30 cycles working in the Galactic Medical Station orbiting Kepler 442b. Three-headed Zorthians with digestive issues, silicon-based life forms complaining about rust, and once, memorably, a sentient gas cloud that had somehow contracted what could only be described as atmospheric hiccups. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared him for the walking disaster that was humanity. The human in question sat on the examination table, swinging his legs like some sort of primitive primate, which, Vex supposed with his characteristic lack of tact, wasn't entirely inaccurate. The creature called itself Marcus Kane, though Vex had serious doubts about whether humans actually named themselves or simply made random sounds until something stuck. "So, Doc," Marcus said, his voice carrying that peculiar human mixture of casual indifference and barely contained violence that made most species want to hide behind something solid. "When do we get this show on the road? I've got a mining operation to supervise, and those Altarian crystals won't extract themselves." Vex's secondary stomach churned. Humans and their obsession with dangerous professions never ceased to amaze him. While every other civilized species had automated their hazardous industries millennia ago, humans seemed to actively seek out ways to put themselves in mortal peril. It was like watching a species-wide death wish play out in real time. "Yes, well," Vex began, adjusting his spectral analyzers with one of his 4 hands, while the other 3 worked the diagnostic equipment. "The mining guild requires a full physical examination before approving any deep-core operations. Standard procedure. Nothing to worry about." That was Vex's first mistake. Telling a human not to worry was like telling a supernova not to explode. Technically possible, but wildly optimistic. Just one thing before we begin. YouTube tells me 94.3% of you watching aren't subscribed. Subscribing is free. It really supports the channel, and you'll get more amazing HFY sci-fi stories delivered straight to you. Don't miss out. Marcus grinned, revealing those horrifying calcium-based grinding implements humans called teeth. "Worry? Doc, I don't worry. I just fix things. Usually with explosives." The casual mention of explosives made Vex's chromatophores shift to a lovely shade of nauseous purple. He'd read the reports about human construction techniques. Apparently, when faced with an obstacle, humans didn't carefully analyze structural weak points or employ precision engineering. No, they simply applied more explosives until the problem ceased to exist. It was simultaneously the most efficient and most terrifying approach to engineering the galaxy had ever witnessed. "Right, well, let's begin with the standard scans," Vex muttered, powering up the quantum resonance imager. The machine hummed to life with that particular whine that meant it was either working perfectly or about to explode. With human technology being what it was, Vex had learned not to bet against the explosion option. The first few scans went relatively normally. Marcus's cardiovascular system showed the typical human redundancy. Apparently, the species had evolved backup systems for their backup systems, which explained a disturbing amount about their survival instincts. His respiratory system was functioning within normal human parameters, which was to say it was somehow extracting oxygen from an atmosphere that should have been mildly toxic to most carbon-based life. Temperature regulation seems optimal, Vex noted, though he privately wondered how any creature could function properly while maintaining the absurdly narrow temperature range humans required. "Muscular development is—" He paused, staring at the readouts. "Are you quite certain you're not wearing some form of exoskeleton?" Marcus laughed, a sound that made Vex's auditory sensors temporarily shut down in self-defense. "Nope. Just good old-fashioned human muscle, Doc. You should see me after I've had my coffee." The mention of that toxic human stimulant made Vex shudder. He'd analyzed human coffee once. The substance was technically a mild poison that somehow made humans more functional, rather than less. It was like discovering that a species had evolved to run on antifreeze. "Let's proceed to the skeletal imaging," Vex said, powering up the X-ray unit. This particular machine was a marvel of Altarian engineering, capable of penetrating matter at the subatomic level and producing images so detailed they could practically perform surgery on individual cells. It was the most advanced diagnostic tool in this sector of the galaxy. Nothing had prepared him for what he saw when Marcus's skeleton appeared on the screen. Vex's eyes, all 6 of them, went wide. His secondary hearts stopped beating. His chromatophores cycled rapidly through every color of distress his species possessed, finally settling on a shade of green that typically indicated imminent system failure. "By the quantum foam of creation," he whispered, his voice trembling like a leaf in a cosmic storm. "What in the name of the great singularity happened to you?" On the screen, Marcus's skeleton looked like a mechanical engineer's fever dream. Metal plates were fused to bones. Screws held joints together. What appeared to be titanium rods ran through his limbs like reinforcing bars in primitive construction. His spine contained enough metal to build a small spacecraft, and his left leg appeared to be held together by what could only be described as industrial-grade hardware. Marcus glanced at the screen with the casual interest of someone checking the weather. "Oh, those? Those are just plates and screws, Doc. Nothing to get excited about." "Nothing to get excited about?" Vex's voice rose 3 octaves, entering frequencies that most species used for emergency broadcasts. "Your skeletal system has been partially replaced with what appears to be construction materials. How are you still alive? How are you walking? How are you not screaming in agony every moment of your existence?" "Well," Marcus said thoughtfully, scratching his chin with the kind of nonchalance that made civilized beings want to question everything they thought they knew about pain tolerance. "It was either that, or stay in bed for the rest of my life. And I had things to do." Vex stared at him, then at the screen, then back at Marcus. "Things to do," he repeated slowly, as if the words might make more sense if pronounced with proper reverence for their absurdity. "Sure. Like that time I fell off a 60-foot cliff during a mountain climbing expedition. Shattered my left femur, cracked 3 ribs, and dislocated my shoulder. But the medical team said they could fix me right up with some metal reinforcement. Good as new, they said. Better, actually, since now I don't have to worry about breaking that leg again." "You fell off a 60-foot cliff," Vex said, his voice achieving new levels of strangled disbelief. "And your response was to have metal surgically implanted in your bones so you could continue mountain climbing?" "Well, not immediately," Marcus clarified, apparently missing the point entirely. "I had to wait 6 weeks for the bones to fuse with the metal. But yeah, basically." Vex's medical training warred with his sense of self-preservation. On one hand, this was clearly a being in desperate need of psychological evaluation. On the other hand, Marcus seemed genuinely unbothered by the fact that he was essentially a cyborg held together by spare parts and willpower. "The mining accident was worse," Marcus continued cheerfully, apparently interpreting Vex's stunned silence as interest rather than existential horror. "Tunnel collapse. Caught me right across the back and both legs. Spent 2 months in surgery while they figured out how to rebuild my spine. The surgeon said it was like doing construction work on a biological level." "Construction work," Vex echoed weakly. "Yeah, they had to install these metal plates along my vertebrae to keep everything stable. And then they put in these screws to hold the plates in place. And then more screws to hold those screws in place. It screws all the way down, you might say. Vex might say no such thing. Vex was too busy questioning every life choice that had led him to this moment. But here's the funny part, Marcus continued, apparently warming to his theme. The doctors said I'd never walk again. Said the damage was too extensive, even with all the metal reinforcement. So naturally, I proved them wrong. Took me 3 months of physical therapy, but I was back on my feet and ready to get back to work. Ready to get back to work, Vex repeated, his voice now achieving frequencies typically reserved for quantum physics equations. In the mines, where tunnel collapses happen. Well, sure. That's where the good ore is. You don't find premium-grade materials in safe, convenient locations, Doc. You've got to go where the danger is. Vex was beginning to understand why humanity had spread across the galaxy with such alarming speed. They weren't explorers or conquerors in any traditional sense. They were a species of beings so fundamentally broken that they actively sought out the most dangerous, inhospitable environments possible, and then made themselves at home there. The shoulder replacement was actually elective, Marcus continued, apparently under the impression that Vex's horrified silence indicated fascination rather than the gradual collapse of everything he thought he knew about biology. I mean, the joint was getting a bit creaky after the 3rd dislocation, so I figured why not upgrade to something more durable. Titanium and ceramic composite. Should last for decades. Elective, Vex whispered. You chose to have your shoulder replaced with machine parts. Well, when you put it like that, it sounds weird, Marcus said with a laugh that made Vex's sanity points decrease by several integers. But think about it practically. The original equipment was clearly flawed, kept breaking down under normal use. So I upgraded to something more reliable. It's just good maintenance. Vex stared at the X-ray again, trying to process the concept of a species that viewed their own bodies as equipment requiring periodic hardware upgrades. How much of you is original? Marcus considered this question with the seriousness of a philosopher contemplating the nature of existence. Hard to say, really. I mean, most of the important bits are still factory standard. Heart, lungs, brain, though that last one's debatable, according to my ex-wife. But skeletal system? Maybe 60% original equipment at this point. 60%. Vex's mathematical processors struggled with the implications. This being was nearly half machine, held together by what amounted to engineering solutions to biological problems, and he was discussing it like routine vehicle maintenance. And the scars? Vex asked weakly, pointing at the screen where multiple areas showed signs of significant tissue trauma. Oh, those. Yeah, you accumulate a few of those over the years. Occupational hazards, mostly. There was the industrial laser incident. That left a mark. The chemical burn from that Zephyrian acid spill. The time I got caught in a solar flare while doing exterior repairs on a space station. That one was interesting. Took weeks for my skin to grow back properly. Your skin grew back, Vex said, his voice now entering subsonic ranges that most species used for mourning rituals. Well, sure. I mean, it took some time, and the medical team had to help with some synthetic grafts. But biology finds a way, right? That's what the doctors said, anyway. Biology finds a way. Nice ring to it. Vex was fairly certain that wasn't what the doctors had meant, but at this point, arguing semantics with a being who treated major reconstructive surgery like routine maintenance seemed like an exercise in futility. Mr. Kane, he said carefully, I need to ask you something important. Do you feel pain? Marcus blinked. Do I feel pain? Of course I feel pain, Doc. I'm not crazy. Then how do you continue functioning with all of this? Vex gestured helplessly at the X-ray, which looked like a technical manual for advanced trauma reconstruction. Well, Marcus said thoughtfully, pain is just information, right? Your body's way of telling you something needs attention. So you pay attention, fix what needs fixing, and get back to work. What's the alternative? Sit around complaining about it. The casual dismissal of what should have been debilitating agony made Vex question everything he thought he knew about neurology. Either humans had evolved pain tolerance that bordered on supernatural, or they were all clinically insane. Possibly both. Besides, Marcus added cheerfully, the really bad pain doesn't last forever. And the stuff that does stick around, you just learn to work with it. Like background noise, you tune it out after a while. Background noise? The being was describing chronic pain from multiple major injuries as background noise. Vex's communication implant chimed, indicating an incoming priority message. He activated it with one of his free hands, grateful for any distraction from the existential crisis currently occurring in his examination room. The message was from Dr. Kayla Thorne, his colleague in the xenobiology department. Vex, I need to see that human X-ray data immediately. The Medical Review Board is requesting full documentation for species classification purposes. Classification purposes, Vex replied, still staring at Marcus, who was now examining the metal fixtures in the examination room with the interest of someone evaluating their structural integrity. Apparently, there's some debate about whether humans should be classified as a biological species or as a form of self-modifying artificial intelligence. The amount of technological integration in their physiology is unprecedented. Vex looked at Marcus, who had somehow managed to identify what appeared to be a minor design flaw in the examination table's support structure, and was now offering helpful suggestions for improvement, involving, naturally, strategic application of explosives. I'm beginning to think, Vex said slowly, that classification might be the least of our problems. 20 minutes later, Doctor. Kayla Thorne burst through the examination room doors with the kind of dramatic flair that suggested either groundbreaking scientific discovery or complete mental breakdown. Given the circumstances, Vex wasn't entirely sure which option he preferred. Vex! She exclaimed, her translucent aquarian features shifting through rapid color changes that indicated extreme excitement. This is absolutely revolutionary. Do you realize what we're looking at here? Marcus, who had been patiently waiting while offering increasingly creative suggestions for improving the room's ventilation system, looked up with mild interest. Hey, there, Doc number 2. I'm Marcus. Nice to meet you. Kayla stopped mid-stride, her chromatic display freezing on a shade of blue that typically indicated system overload. This was her first direct encounter with a human, and Vex could practically see her xenobiology training colliding with reality, like two freight trains loaded with contradictory data. You're very casual about all of this, she managed, gesturing vaguely at the X-ray display that was still showing Marcus's mechanical skeleton in all its horrifying glory. All of what? Marcus asked, genuinely puzzled. It's just a medical checkup. Pretty routine stuff. Routine, Kayla repeated, her voice climbing toward frequencies that marine life used for echolocation. Sir, according to these scans, you've undergone more reconstructive surgery than most space stations receive during their entire operational lifetime. Well, sure, but that's just life, isn't it? Stuff breaks, you fix it, you move on. Speaking of which, he turned to Vex, how much longer is this going to take? I've got a dinner date with some Centaurian engineers tonight, and they get really grumpy if you're late. Something about temporal precision being culturally significant. Vex and Kayla exchanged glances. The fact that humans casually socialized with Centaurians, a species so obsessed with punctuality that they measured social interactions in nanoseconds, was somehow the least surprising thing they'd learned today. "Mr. Kane," Kayla said carefully, "we need to understand something. How is your species still classified as purely biological when you've integrated this much technology into your physiology?" Marcus scratched his head, an action that apparently required careful consideration of the metal plates in his skull. "Well, I mean, it's not like we're born with the metal bits. We just add them when the original parts wear out. It's pretty straightforward, really." "Straightforward," Vex muttered under his breath, making notes on his datapad that were becoming increasingly incoherent as his sanity continued its steady decline. "The thing is," Kayla continued, her scientific curiosity warring with her sense of self-preservation, "most species in the galaxy view their bodies as, well, sacred vessels that shouldn't be modified unless absolutely necessary for survival. The idea of elective mechanical integration is terrifying," Marcus suggested helpfully. "Yeah, I get that a lot. But here's the thing, and don't take this the wrong way. But most species seem to have this weird attachment to keeping their original equipment even when it's clearly not working anymore. Humans just take a more practical approach." "Practical?" Kayla echoed, staring at the X-ray where Marcus's spine resembled a construction project more than a biological structure. "Sure. Like, my buddy Jake, he's a deep space welder. He had his entire left arm replaced after an accident with a plasma torch. Not because he had to, mind you, but because the replacement has built-in tool interfaces and enhanced strength. Made him better at his job. He actually thanked the plasma torch for giving him the excuse to upgrade." Vex's stylus snapped in half. "He thanked the plasma torch." "Well, not literally. That would be weird. But you know what I mean. Sometimes accidents open up opportunities for improvement. It's all about perspective." Before either doctor could process this latest assault on their understanding of basic survival instincts, Vex's communication implant chimed again. This time, the message was from Admiral Zara Voss of the Galactic Medical Council, and her tone suggested that whatever she had to say was going to make their day significantly worse. "Dr. Moreland, I need you and Dr. Thorne to report to the Emergency Council session immediately. Bring your human subject. We have a situation." Marcus perked up. "Ooh, a situation! I love situations. They're usually much more interesting than routine checkups." "This isn't a good thing," Vex said weakly. "Says who?" "Some of my best experiences started with someone saying, 'We had a situation.' Like the time that Rigelian mining platform started losing structural integrity, and we had to figure out how to keep it from falling into a gas giant while everyone evacuated. Good times." Kala and Vex stared at him. The concept of enjoying mortal peril was so fundamentally alien to their way of thinking that their brains simply refused to process it properly. "Come on," Marcus said, hopping off the examination table with the kind of energetic enthusiasm that suggested his various mechanical components were functioning optimally. "Let's go see what kind of trouble we're in for. I bet it's something interesting." The Emergency Council session was held in the station's main conference chamber, a vast room designed to accommodate representatives from 17 different species, each with their own environmental requirements and communication methods. The result was a carefully controlled atmospheric chaos that somehow managed to support life forms ranging from methane-breathing crystalline entities to beings made entirely of organized plasma. Admiral Voss was waiting for them, her Valkyrian features set in an expression that suggested someone was about to have a very bad day. Around the conference table, representatives from various species were engaged in animated discussions that ranged from scientific curiosity to outright panic. "Doctors Moreland and Thorne," she began without preamble, "please present your findings regarding human physiology to the Council." Vex activated the holographic display, and Marcus's skeletal X-ray appeared in full three-dimensional glory above the conference table. The reaction was immediate and varied. The Aquarians shifted to colors indicating extreme distress. The Centaurians began rapid-fire calculations that filled the air with mathematical symbols, and the plasma beings fluctuated in ways that their translator systems interpreted as profanity in 17 different languages. "As you can see," Vex began, his voice shaking only slightly, "the subject exhibits extensive technological integration throughout his skeletal system. Metal plates, titanium rods, ceramic joint replacements, and what appears to be a full spinal reinforcement array." "And this is considered normal for your species?" Admiral Voss asked Marcus directly. Marcus looked around the room at the assembled representatives, most of whom were staring at him with expressions ranging from fascination to horror. "Well, not everyone needs this much work done, obviously. I've been pretty unlucky with accidents. But yeah, it's fairly standard procedure when things need fixing." A representative from the Ethereal Collective, a being that existed primarily as organized thought patterns, spoke up in harmonics that made the translation system work over time. "The question before us is whether humans should be reclassified as a cybernetic species rather than a biological one." "But that's ridiculous," Marcus protested. "I'm still mostly original parts. The metal stuff is just reinforcement. It's like architectural support beams in a building." "Architectural support beams," the Ethereal repeated, and Vex could swear he detected a note of hysteria in the translated tones. "The issue," Admiral Voss explained, "is that by galactic standards, the level of technological integration you've demonstrated qualifies as cybernetic enhancement. Most species only undergo such procedures in cases of absolute medical necessity, and even then, the modifications are kept to an absolute minimum. Most species," Marcus said thoughtfully, "probably don't have jobs that involve regular exposure to industrial accidents, hostile environments, and things that explode without warning." "That's another concerning factor," interjected Dr. Elex Cran, the Centaurian representative, whose 6 eyes were all focused on Marcus with the intensity of a targeting system. "Your species appears to actively seek out dangerous occupations and environments. This suggests either severe psychological dysfunction or evolutionary adaptation to extreme hazard tolerance." "Or both," Marcus said cheerfully, "though I prefer to think of it as being practical. If you need rare materials, you go where the rare materials are. If those places happen to be dangerous, well, that's just part of the job description." The room fell silent, except for the ambient hum of life support systems struggling to maintain 17 different atmospheric compositions simultaneously. Finally, Admiral Voss spoke. "Mr. Kane, I need to ask you something, and I want you to understand that your answer may have significant implications for how your species is classified in our databases." "Shoot," Marcus said, apparently interpreting the Admiral's serious tone as mere bureaucratic formality. "Given the choice between avoiding danger and facing it head-on, what would you choose?" Marcus didn't even hesitate. Face it head-on, obviously. You can't solve problems by avoiding them. Plus, Dangerous situations tend to be where you find the most interesting challenges. And if facing that danger meant risking death or serious injury? Well, sure, but that's true of pretty much everything worth doing. You could get hit by a meteor walking to the store, but that doesn't mean you stop buying groceries. The Aquarian representative shifted to a color that Vex's translator indicated meant something along the lines of existential terror mixed with grudging admiration. Mr. Kane, Admiral Voss continued, are you aware that most civilized species consider self-preservation to be the primary biological imperative? Marcus looked genuinely puzzled. Sure, but survival isn't just about avoiding risks. It's about adapting to them. If you spend all your time trying to stay safe, you never get anywhere interesting. Plus, the universe is a big, dangerous place. You might as well make friends with the danger instead of hiding from it. Make friends with the danger, Doctor. Cran repeated slowly, his 6 eyes blinking in sequence like warning lights on a malfunctioning spacecraft. Absolutely. Like, take my job in the mines. Sure, there are cave-ins, toxic gases, unstable equipment, and the occasional spatial anomaly that makes gravity work sideways. But that's also where you find the most valuable resources in the galaxy. Risk and reward, you know? Spatial anomaly that makes gravity work sideways, Vex whispered, adding yet another entry to his growing list of reasons why humans should probably be quarantined for the safety of all other life forms. Admiral Voss looked around the conference table, taking in the expressions of her fellow council members. I think we need to reframe our approach to this classification issue. Dr. Thorne, what's your professional assessment of human psychology based on your observations? Kayla cleared her throat, consulting her notes with the careful attention of someone trying to make sense of fundamentally incomprehensible data. Based on my analysis, humans appear to have evolved what can only be described as aggressive adaptation strategies. Rather than avoiding environmental hazards, they integrate with them. Rather than accepting biological limitations, they engineer solutions. They treat their own bodies as modular systems that can be upgraded and modified as needed. Modular systems, the ethereal collective representative mused. This implies a level of detachment from biological identity that is unprecedented among organic species. I wouldn't say detached, Marcus interjected, more like pragmatic. If something's broken, you fix it. If something could work better, you improve it. If something's dangerous, you figure out how to make it less dangerous or how to be more dangerous than it is. It's just common sense. The room fell, silent again. The concept of treating mortal peril as a problem to be solved rather than a situation to be avoided was so alien to most of the assembled species that their translation systems were struggling to find appropriate conceptual frameworks. Finally, Admiral Voss stood up. Based on the evidence presented, I move that humans be classified as a unique hybrid category. Adaptive cybernetic biologicals. They maintain biological base systems while demonstrating unprecedented willingness to integrate technological enhancements for functional improvement. Seconded, said Dr. Cran, though his tone suggested he wasn't entirely happy about it. All in favor? The vote was unanimous, though several representatives looked like they were voting for their own sanity as much as for accurate classification. Well, Marcus said as the council session concluded, that was fun. Though I'm not entirely sure what just happened. Am I still allowed to do my job, or do I need to fill out additional paperwork now? Admiral Voss looked at him with an expression that mixed professional obligation with personal bewilderment. You can continue your work, Mister Kane. However, we're going to need to establish new safety protocols for human operations. Apparently, our previous guidelines were based on the assumption that most species would avoid potentially fatal situations. That seems reasonable, Marcus agreed, though you might want to check with the other humans first. I'm actually pretty cautious compared to some of my colleagues. My friend Sarah works in experimental faster-than-light propulsion. Now, that's a dangerous job. As they left the conference chamber, Vex found himself walking beside Marcus, still trying to process everything that had happened. "Mr. Kane, can I ask you something?" "Sure, Doc." "Don't you ever get scared? Facing all these dangerous situations, dealing with constant risk of injury or death?" Marcus considered the question seriously. "Of course I get scared sometimes. Fear's useful. It keeps you alert, makes you think twice before doing something really stupid. But being scared isn't a reason to stop doing something. It's just information to help you do it better." Vex nodded slowly, though he wasn't sure he understood. "And the pain? The injuries? The constant need for medical intervention and mechanical replacement parts?" "Well," Marcus said with that unsettling human smile, "it beats being bored. Plus, every scar tells a story, and every replacement part means I'm a little bit tougher than I was before. In a way, all those accidents and injuries made me better at my job. More experienced, more resilient, better equipped to handle whatever comes next." As they reached the medical bay, Vex realized something that made his chromatophores shift to a color he'd never displayed before. A mixture of terror, admiration, and profound respect. Humans weren't just tough. They weren't just adaptable. They were a species that had somehow managed to turn their greatest weakness, their fragile biology, into their greatest strength by refusing to accept limitations and constantly improving themselves through whatever means necessary. They were, in essence, a biological species that had decided to become something more without waiting for evolution to catch up. "Mr. Kane," Vex said finally, "I think I'm beginning to understand why your species has spread across the galaxy so quickly." Marcus grinned. "Oh, Doc, you haven't seen anything yet. Wait until you meet the humans who work in experimental quantum physics. Now those folks are really crazy." And with that terrifying thought, Marcus Kane walked out of the medical bay, presumably to return to his job of extracting valuable materials from places that actively tried to kill anything that came near them. Vex watched him go, then turned to his medical notes. At the top of the page, he wrote, "Humans, classification, adaptive cybernetic biologicals. Prognosis, they're going to take over the galaxy, and they're going to do it by accident while trying to fix something that's probably better left broken." Then he added a personal note. "Recommend immediate psychological counseling for all medical staff who interact with humans. Also recommend hazard pay. Lots of hazard pay." In the distance, he could hear Marcus explaining to someone in the corridor about the time he'd accidentally invented a new form of mining explosive while trying to make his coffee stronger. Vex sighed and poured himself a drink. It was going to be a long career,